Okay, how's it going? So, if you've been following up on my latest activity on LinkedIn, or if you're following me anywhere, I've been doing some work on test driven, and in the last couple of posts, we have been talking about how to think about test driven and how to test that stuff like network, those kind of stuff that you don't actually have 100% control over, and how do we test those and how do we deal with them in a test driven context. And today, after I think that we have reached a good amount or progress in such a series, I wanted to add some refactoring because I'm not really happy with how the code is at the current state. But that's pretty normal because you're trying to explain stuff and you're not actually trying to jam everything in. You're just at first step. You don't want to go to the 10th step, or you're gonna fall down the stairs. So today is where we're gonna focus on refactoring. And if you haven't actually followed up, I suggest you do, because it would make more sense unless you just want to hop right into action as much as I want. So, okay, so in the last step, we have finished testing our cache, and we introduced some concepts like mocking. So I'm going to go from there, and let's first know, why do we need refactoring and what is the problem? After all, if you want to better something, you have to know where it comes short. And let's give our example a look, where we're just trying to log in. We're not doing anything fancy. And you're going to see that as the actual authentication happens here. And whatever happens before that is just maybe doing some validation, maybe just synchronizing the view state, or maybe clearing out if there's any errors, or notifying the user, and so on and so on. Of course, all of this is correct, and you're going to end up with something that is working, but in the code, that is a code smell. Because let's see where the code smell comes from. First, you're doing validation, you're not doing login, and you're syncing the view, which is on error here, or maybe just a delegation or just a callback. And then you are, if there's no errors, you're just flushing out the error state and you are authenticating. Then after you're authenticating, you are updating the cache. So you're doing lots of stuff here, very lots of stuff, when this function is just supposed to be doing logging. So what we can do here is, first, let's break things down. So I know that I'm supposed to do validation. I know that I should update my view state, and I should authenticate and update the cache, right? But all of this are like, at least those two are like preconditions before this function can run. So how about if we took this one and focus on the problem or validation only from this video, and then go from there? That would be made more manageable, thinking wise and effort wise. So let's do the basic thing, which is just export it to a function. And let's say validate. And that is the first step. After every refactor, let's make sure that we are compiling correctly, which is clearly not. And if it's, yep, let's say empty. If you're not following up, this is something I explained in the blog, so I'm just gonna move from there. And So after that, let's add our get comments here. This is a good practice because if you want to return to where you were, you can do that. Okay, so now that we're back, still we can vastly improve this one. And as you can see, we are only testing email now. So if I go with if email is empty, if password is empty, validation blah 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 blah, we're not gonna end it, and we're gonna be duplicating code. And honestly, we can do better than this. And coming from the concept that we discussed in the previous vlogs, we can do swipe use and JSON overflows through protocols, and that is what we're gonna do. So let's first try to adapt some thinking that I adopted from one of my mentors, which is I want to have something that does validation. This something should have, like, that says, if I give you this is your problem. So if I'm thinking abstract, I want to have something called validation rule. This validation rule would just have to be validated. It doesn't know anything else. And that's basically it. So meanwhile, if I say I have like a validation email rule, so let's say let's just not focus on access modifiers for now, but they're really important. And email validation rule, and all I have to say is just validate. But it still needs an email or a value. Let's give it that. Now, if I said something like this, guard email is empty for else throw validation error, and this validation error will just be like this. That is what I was doing here. So technically, if I say try validation rule, then give it the email, then I say validate, I'm basically doing what I was doing there. So as we were talking, what we have done is, as long as you know, that is more code, and basically we're not trying to be less code here, but we're definitely gonna see less code. And what we've done actually is allow ourselves to make some space to reuse some of our logic here. This might not be obvious, it will be in shortly, but this protocol here can allow me to do lots of stuff later on. And by stuff, I mean that if I were to add a password, and if I say, hey, password, you need to conform to validation rule, it will do just the same, and I'll just have to do the same here and make sure it's not empty, and I will be ending up with the same kind of validation. So let's try to test before we go to the next step. And if we go to our test, we need to make sure that we're covering it. And yep, an email is not affected. So let's try to make the same thing for the password, but in a TDD way. So password, I'm just gonna fill up the email for is something valid. and try to test, and nope, it's supposed to fail. Okay, that is great. Okay, you're not supposed to actually hit the network. Let's see. So you are bypassing the email, but you should not bypass the password, and that is the first issue we have. Okay, so and let's go to the login, and let's go to our validate and try to add a new password validation. So try to password validation rule, value is password, and validate it. Then we can duplicate that, and that is not a good thing, and you'll see how to fix that. Password, okay, password is empty. All right, so let's try to test. Wow, that actually worked. So how did it work? If you've been following up, and by adding this and actually reusing this code by copying and paste it, which is not really great, and it made the same thing available for the password. But the thing is that we are copying and pasting. Wouldn't it be nice if we haven't duplicate any code? Like I can just write one thing and it would automatically do the same thing for every rule I have without actually copying and pasting. And actually that is actually available, and we can do that. So how can we do that? First, our target was to move the validation away from the login, and we did this by doing it here. Then we wanted to shorten our responsibilities in our code, and that is what are we trying to do next. Then we're going to try to extend our capabilities of the validation, which is have the strength validation for the password, invalidate in make sure the email is not invalid, make sure it has minimum and maximum, make sure it is complex enough, and so on and so on. So one step at a time, what we're trying to do next is actually reuse this and this. And there's also another way through protocols. This is another concept, which is interface segregation. So interface segregation here would be is empty. Is this field mandatory or not? So why don't we introduce that, and let's say protocol is mandatory. Mandatory validate is empty, and close if it is empty. So let's extend this mandatory field, because this is not specific to something and it would be more general, and we will see why we're extending it and giving it a default value or default implementation. So if a field is mandatory, I would like if the rule in which the field complies to would not be empty, and if it is empty it would throw. So wouldn't it be great if I had access to the field here? And actually I can, but first I need to do one thing, which is make sure that there's a field in the protocol or the conformer itself, the implementer. Implementer conformer is what I mean by email validation rule, the one that implements this rule. Business configuration, validation, and field. And it will be get, because it can only be declared once, and it can be read, but I don't want to set it more than once. So I would want to say I also need the value. So if I need a value. Maybe I can add it here. Yeah. So let's say if I have private kernel var value, which is a string, string, and it would be get only as well, because I don't want to set it outside the validation rule. Actually, I don't want to mutate it anywhere inside the validation rule or outside it. So get here makes sense. So let's extension to where self is validation rule. So I want to say guard value is empty equal false, else throw validation error empty and field is what I am going to throw. So coming from this state, I can say something like this is mandatory as well, and the field here would be equal to email, and here it would be password, and all I need to do here is try validate is empty. Is empty, it would throw, if it's here, it is throw as well. So all I needed to do actually is declare this and only this. This is the only configuration I needed to add. So let's try to test, and it worked. So coming from this one, now we added more structure since we used this part, and we also have another criteria, which is the minimum and maximum. So let's first add this circuit. Introducing the too long and too short one. So let's go to what we want to do. First, let's go with the test. And let's say on test given and controls. And if we hit and run, that would fail because too short is not really there yet. So let's add it. And let's try to build and test. It ran, but it would crash because it now continues. Where is the validate and validation rule? Another validation rule that we want to add, which is too short. So a good name for too short would be protocol as minimum, and in that case that would also be the same thing. And if we say it has minimum, and then we say try to validate is too short. Oh, I should that is one thing we nailed down. Just has minimum and is mandatory. So from these two concepts, we were able to do two things, I guess. Maybe for the third one. First, we were able to isolate the validation inside its own class, inside its own function. So if I were to take this one and validate it in tests, give it any value I can, and I should expect an output, then I can test this process. If I give it something shorter than 8, it should throw a too short password. If it's empty, it should throw the errors that corresponds to this, and so on. So this one is testable. The above one is also testable, but this one is more scalable and more readable. Because if I go here, I can know, okay, he is validating if it's empty, if it's short, if it has something in the future, and so on. And same thing goes for has maximum and password strength validation. So I'm going to refactor this one and give you the final output. You can check it out, but mainly the goal of this video is achieved. And if you have any questions, please just bring me if you want, and I'll be happy actually to answer any questions. So hope you have enjoyed this quick session, and for some reason I don't know why the music has stopped, and have a good day.